Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank my little brother for such a good sermon this morning. I was talking with Mr. Steve the other day, and he said that preachers either get pay or praise for a good sermon. And based on his glowing invitation, I guess me and Timmy are in trouble. Psalm 51 is one of the few psalms where we are given a historical background. Though uninspired, this inscription seemingly sets forth the tone for this psalm and its sentiments of sorrow and remorse. It states, a psalm of David, when Nathan the prophet came to him after he had gone into Bathsheba. This identifies clearly for us the incident out of which this psalm arose. The background for this psalm can be found in 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12. It was the time when David became involved in the double sin of adultery and murder while he was king. He had walked with God for many years. He had gained a reputation as a man who understood the deep things of God. He had established himself as a longtime spiritual leader of his people and was truly a man after God's own heart. And then suddenly, towards the end of his reign, he became involved in this terrible sin. The interesting thing is that David himself records this experience for us. It must have been a painfully humiliating experience for the king. He was out on his palace roof one day and saw a beautiful woman next door bathing herself. His passions were aroused, and he sent over messengers and ordered her to be brought to him. Then he entered into an adulterous relationship with her. All this time, her husband, a soldier in David's army, was out fighting for his king. When David knew that ultimately his sin would be found out, he ordered Uriah to be sent home from the battle, hoping that he would be with his wife and the child would be accepted as his own. But Uriah was a faithful soldier and committed to the battle along with his fellow soldiers. He didn't go into his wife, but instead he slept with the soldiers at the palace and returned to the battle the following day. When David knew that his sin would be found out, he took another step. Isn't that what sin always does? It seems to lead us deeper and deeper, farther and farther away from where we ever intended to go. Before David knew it, he was forced into a desperate attempt to cover up his actions. He ordered Uriah to be put in the forefront of the battle, where he would most certainly be killed. Once David received news of Uriah's death, he must have felt as if he was off the hook because he had safely covered up his sins. But Nathan, as a messenger of God, confronted David with a parable in regards to his sin. He told David, "You are the man." When confronted and convicted of this terrible sin he had committed, David fell flat on his face before God, and out of this experience of confession comes this beautiful 51st Psalm. A great student of the Bible once wrote, "This psalm is the brightest gem in the book. Contains instructions so large and doctrine so precious that the tongue of angels could not do it justice to the full development." In this psalm, we're going to see two basic pleas from David. David wanted his song back, and David recognized that the chords of his song were out of tune with the chords of the Father. In May of 2003, there was a man who mountain climbing and had his arm stuck between a cliff and a rock and had to cut it off in order to save his life. The point of this story is that there are certain things that we have to cut away in order to live a Christian life. Christianity is not an easy life by any means. Sometimes we have to cut things away that keep us from being loyal to God. If David was going to get his song back and be known once again as the man after God's own heart, there would have to be some cutting away. In Psalm 51, David acknowledges that he has made some serious mistakes in his life. David, in a manner of speaking, is saying, "Lord, I've amputated my arm, and I've made my journey back to you. I was once away, but now I'm back." Notice the plea that David is making in Psalm 51, verses 10 through 12. "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from thy presence, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of thy salvation, and uphold me with a free spirit. As righteous people, we are never perfect. But righteous people always find their way back to God. David was guilty of adultery and murder. However, he had convinced himself that he had done absolutely nothing wrong. Have you ever done something wrong, then convinced yourself that it wasn't? In order for the joy of salvation to be restored, we must realize and be convicted of what sin really is. David was such a good man. However, he did not right his wrong immediately, so Nathan confronted him about his sin in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 1 through 7. 2 Samuel chapter 12, verses 1 through 7. And the Lord sent Nathan unto David, and he came unto him, and said unto him, There were 2 men in one city, one rich, the other poor. The rich man had exceeding many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing, save one little lamb that he had bought and nourished up, and it grew up together with him and with his children. It ate of his own meat, and drank of his cup, and was unto him as a daughter. And there came a traveler unto the rich man, and he spared to take of his own flock and of his own herd, to dress for the wayfaring man that was come unto him, but took the poor man's lamb, and dressed it for the man that was come to him. And David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. And he said, As the Lord lives, the man who did this thing shall surely die, and he shall repay the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing, and because he had no pity. And Nathan said to David, You are the man.